This is Phantom Electric Ghost, and we're live on there for the first time with Kacey Kingry. And welcome to the Phantom Electric Ghost podcast.
Thank you, Phantom. I'm so happy to be with you. Can't wait to see what happens in the next hour.
This is going to be episode 936 of the Phantom Electric Ghost podcast. We're tracking that on Apple Podcast. We've been on the air since 2016. And this episode, the topic is going to be how to share your truth in a way that represents your authenticity so you can get what you really want. And then I'll put your website back up for people to check this out, because we always encourage people who listen to the podcast, because some of our audience don't watch it, they listen to it. So we do want to mention your link. It's www.lifecoachingbylotus.com. Again, that's www.lifecoachingbylotus.com. That will be clickable when we're published on platforms like Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube, and all the other podcast platforms that we're on. So again, welcome to the podcast. And how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing wonderful. It's a beautiful day here in Minnesota. The sun is shining and the birds are chirping and life feels pretty good.
Now we've got the questions you like to answer, but we also got some talking points. And one of the talking points you had is, what role does the heart play both energetically and anatomically within the chakra system and the body, as well as the body? So I don't know if you want to start with that and then maybe go to the other points that we could go to. There's a lot of different things we could get into.
There's a lot of different things we can get to. Well, maybe it would make sense to introduce myself a little bit and just share basically the crux of what I do, which will then give me a sort of vehicle to talk about the heart chakra and the energy that we find there. But I'm a breakthrough coach, and a lot of people don't know what that means. For me, it's like a life coach on steroids a little bit. But what I do is I specialize in really helping people kind of conquer an issue or move through something that has historically plagued them in the past. And I know how to do this because I did it my own self in my own life with a breakthrough that I created with alcoholism. And I'm almost 5 years alcohol free right now. And I just remember for about literally 20 plus years of being an adult, just sort of like crying out, saying, is life ever going to change? How will I ever get through this? And I was able to really move through it in a way that allowed me to truly be free. There are some modalities that ask you to stay focused on not drinking so that you can keep not drinking, but that's not really my definition of healing. My definition of healing is that we can like take all that kinetic energy that we've been using with these old patterns and things that are really hanging us up, and that we can free that kinetic energy from those outdated patterns and really use it towards our brilliance and towards living out our mission in life. And so that is what breakthrough means to me, is that we can take all this energy that, people spend being dissatisfied with their bodies and use it to actually go enjoy their lives. Or they can take all this energy and shame and money and all these things that get wrapped up in the cycle of alcoholism or other drug use, and that you can truly be free from that and use that energy to go live your brilliance. So that's what a breakthrough coach means to me. So as I help people to create breakthroughs in their lives, most often what that means is that we take an inside out approach, which means that we have to get a sense for what's happening inside of us internally. And I was a drinker for many years, but the biggest theme for my life is that I've been a yoga teacher for 20 plus years. And I'll actually correct myself. I've been a yoga practitioner for 20 plus years, but I've been a yoga teacher for about 16. And the chakra system that lives inside of us can give us create on the inside that then affect how we interact on the outside. Are you with me so far? Can I just keep going?
Yes. Yeah, you can keep on going.
So the reason that I am so focused on the heart specifically is because we live in a society, this modern Western world, that says that the mind trumps all. And while the mind is something we couldn't live without, for so many different reasons, it's really just one organ out of all of these organs that live inside of us. And we've, been taught like mind over matter. logic trumps everything, reason over all. And so now we've got a lot of these people we're just living in our heads all the time and basing all of our life decisions on everything that happens above the neck. And Richard Rudd, who is a teacher of mine who created a concept called the gene keys, he likes to say that we place all this value on the mind, and yet all of the greatest problems in the world have yet to be solved. Right. So my inkling is that the answers don't necessarily live up here. And so this gets really good for me when you start to consider research from the HeartMath Institute. The HeartMath Institute recently-ish came out with a lot of data to support that while the brain sends tons of information to the body, the heart actually sends way more information to the brain than the brain ever sends to the heart, which tells me that it really matters how we feel inside of our hearts. And it's actually these feelings that we carry inside of our hearts and the nervous system that dictate the patterns that we create and our identities in life. And so really for me, it's this portal of the emotions, of the energetic and emotional habits that we fall into that are really key to creating breakthrough. Whew, big speech.
Well, as a musician and a creative, and I kind of understand both because my day job, I'm a software engineer. And then the other part of my life, I'm a creative person. I'm a producer, I'm a
Mhm.
synthesist, I'm a sound designer, I'm a keyboardist. And what I found is my art kind of keeps me centered because I'm a poet too. I started with poetry, and I believe that when believe in something like the muse, I love Victorian poetry, and a lot of the poets like Blake and Tennyson, Wordsworth, and even all types of poets going back to Shakespeare. There's this belief that there's this muse in the universe, and our heart and our soul, they tap into that. It's not just the brain. And musicians, we believe that too, because we can find what we call, like, we find that kind of I know it's just the flow where you don't overthink it, like especially in jazz. Like we when you actually let go of your logic and you trust your capability as a musician, you just go with whatever you're feeling, and it's
Mhm.
very core. And I think people who are creative, we can understand that, and the logic is important all the time. But I think a lot of people focus on science and math and logic have lost the fact that creative capability is a lot of what, you know, to me, actually makes the world is the art, the artist in the world.
Completely. They go hand in hand, and it's that relationship between the mental body and the emotional body that create your life. And what I really heard you say just now is that, well, said a lot of things, and I don't mean to distill it to just one thing, but the thing that really stuck out to me is that it sounds like as a musician, you give yourself time to drop out of your head intentionally, and that you consciously choose or understand that you're not spending all of your time and resources up here, which is such a gift. And not many people even know that it's an option not to live up here all the time. And so that's why yoga, that's why poetry, that's why music, right? And so that we can get out of our brains and into ourselves to really understand who we are as whole people, not just this cerebral mental part of us. There's actually three brains that live inside of us. We've got the skull brain that lives in between our ears, but the heart is also considered a brain because it's a huge disseminator of information. And then the gut, the stomach, is considered to be the gut brain. And you probably already know this, but science has shown us that the cells that comprise the inside of our stomach linings are the same types of cells that comprise our brain matter. So when we have like a gut instinct or our physiological mechanism that's taking place, but we often miss it because we just live in this world that prizes the logical mind. So much of pattern change is understanding what's happening up here because it's all related, but then really understanding. No, most life coaches will say that your thoughts create your results. And I believe that too, but I would like to modify that and say it's actually your thoughts and your feelings in a loop together that create your results. And I might even raise my hand to say that as much as our thoughts become habitual, I think our emotions become habitual, and we just very easily identify and slide into victimization or frustration or resentment, and we don't even really know it. So really understanding all of these inner workings can be so liberating for people.
Well, I'm a strong believer in there's like a multi-directional path between your body, mind, soul, and heart, spirit. I name my identity is like Phantom Electric Ghost, because the idea there's like these phantom, you
Mm,
inspirations that come from the universe, and electricity is inside everything, including the synthesizers I used. And Dr. Robert Moog, the guy who invented the American synthesizer, had all these statements as an inventor, as a doctor of electrical mechanical engineering, said that he believed his instruments had a consciousness because of the electricity that went through
mm,
them. And a lot of people who are into his understanding of why he created the synthesizer is he felt like you could tap into this like unparalleled world of inspiration from sound waves. Actually, like just a high level, we take sine waves, like sine waves, cosine waves, square waves, ramp waves, and we turn them into sound. What we find as musicians is those sounds actually affect people's emotions. They trigger people's behavior. You can actually make people melancholy. You can make them happy. You can make them irritated. You can see this with musicians at concerts. You can get people in tune. You can get people out of tune. You can actually trigger behavior from the waves and from the patterns in the waves that you're using. If you understand that as a musician, you can start to understand this whole universal connection between like the heart, the mind, the soul, and the waveforms that are out there. So it's kind of like the heart and the soul and the mind, they're all talking to each other. And I know I believe that totally, as an artist. But
oh, that's beautiful what you just said. Can I add my chakra system on top of that?
yeah,
Because
it's
the
by
chakras
soul part.
actually do flow that way, right? And it's all electricity and energy. But the way the chakras are formed, which I think is so interesting, and for anyone listening who has never heard of the chakras or isn't familiar, please don't get scared or tune out. Chakras are just a Sanskrit word for energy center, and it translates in the Sanskrit to mean wheel. They're basically these wheels of energy that we've got inside of our bodies, and there's 7 of them that are the classic chakras that we hold inside of our system. But really, when we understand them, what they can do is they can give us a lot of insight into what's happening on the inside. As a life coach, I always say, like, it's so easy to look at other people's stuff. Like, it's so easy from the outside looking in to see what's going on, but when it's happening internally, it's so swirly and tangled and messy and murky sometimes. So the chakras can often be a pathway out of that. But very simply, there are 7 chakras. And so there are 3 in the lower part of the body, which is considered the lower triangle. And then there are 3 sort of in the neck and above, which are considered the upper triangle. And the heart, guess what, lives right in between these triangles. And so the lower triangle points upwards towards the heart, and the upper triangle points downwards towards the heart. And so, really, like, the key to understanding what's happening in the heart is understanding what messages your mind is feeding it. It's understanding your foundation and the way you were raised and the messages your subconscious received that you've built your life upon, and how those messages of scarcity or victimization or disempowerment or vice versa are feeding into your heart. So it's really like, I think as modern day Westerners, we have such a laser like focus, which can be so beautiful at times. But really, when we zoom out and see ourselves as a whole system, like you just described, like seeing the connection between the pieces that live inside of us and seeing the connection between those pieces inside and the pieces outside, like, that's when we can really get somewhere, seeing it the whole picture.
Yeah, it seems like the way a star is the center of a solar system, like your heart is the center of your actual
Mm,
human system. Though everybody thinks it's the mind, it's actually the heart, which makes more sense because I actually lived in Japan for 2 years. So I
yeah.
got an appreciation for Eastern culture and for that kind of mysticism from a Japanese. I actually follow Nichiren Daishonin Buddhism, which is a more Eastern philosophy, but it's the idea of like the law of cause and effect and those type of things, which is not what Western society believes in. So I have more of a understanding of that kind of, because I actually lived with my daughter and my wife in Japan. My daughter went to Japanese school for kindergarten and preschool. So she got introduced to Eastern philosophy from the beginning. And so I thought that that was really gave her a head start. And even to this day, I think it gives her a different perspective than most American kids. She has like a holistic perspective that she understands both. But something that sometimes Westerners are lacking because we don't appreciate other things, or we kind of try to be too much in our head and think about things in a very sequential way rather than looking at things in kind of a holistic way. It could be going multiple directional influences.
Yep. Yep. What a gift you gave your daughter by having that as part of her upbringing. I mean, that's I think of how different my life would be if I had had an understanding of how these two parts of the world could converge in a really harmonious way. So what a gift definitely you've given her. You said that the heart was the center of the solar system. That's like I could cry hearing that. It's so beautiful. So many people think that the heart, like in the chakra system, is designed to love. And of course, that's one of its characteristics. But really, the heart inside of our energetic system is meant to provide equilibrium. So it's the center. Your heart will literally, and this is why it's so important when it comes to our emotional cycles and then our cycles out in the world, is that self. They're designed for your survival. So when you're getting all this information from the heart's not going to say, "Oh no, wait, that's actually not how we want to do this. Like I actually would like to be more empowered, or I'd actually like to be feel more safe to open myself." Like your heart's not going to do that. Your heart's going to take what you give it, and then it's going to kind of distort itself to do what it needs to do so that you can keep being you at the root and the crown. You know what I mean? So it's like your heart, it will all kind of culminate in here if we're paying attention. But like you said, we kind of aren't.
Yeah, it's kind of like when people start to finally listen to their inner child because people told them, well, I always talk about this where people have truths that aren't really truths, they're beliefs. And their beliefs, like their parents said that you're not good enough, right? That art doesn't mean anything. That you're never gonna, make it that way. So you shouldn't even apply it. And so I run into a lot of artists that like they finally got to a truth that wasn't just a belief. It's like they started to listen to their heart and say, I really want to be an artist. And I know everybody says you can't do that or you shouldn't do that because you're not going to be successful. But you have to do what you feel. It's kind of like what your gut tells you, and it is your gut and your heart and your soul and your spirit kind of tells you. Because like a lot of times, what we do as artists is get gut instinct. A lot of it is like it doesn't always make logical sense why we do things that we do. We do it because we feel that's the right thing, and you can't really explain it other than it's like I believe that this is the right path, and it's hard to describe to people who don't understand that, but it's not always going to be a logical thing. There's a
When
lot of
you
feeling.
when you know that, is it does where do you know that? Where how do you know that?
Well, it's like when I'm writing, it's like the problem is the logical brain when you write will start to make you start and stop and start and stop and start and stop. When you start to let go of that, you just actually let yourself flow. And then when you let yourself flow, you actually can end up with a complete song without even really planning it. It just kind of comes together. Now, a lot of that
Wow.
is because of what you muscle memory and the ability that you know your instrument. But you actually listen. You're a lot about being an artist is you listen to the inside and the outside all at the same time. So it's what you're
Mm,
feeling, what you read, what you heard, things you had done before, and it all kind of subconsciously comes together. And artists, we subconsciously have themes that we might have been inspired by who we like to listen to, or it might be something that somebody said, or something that you saw, and it just shows up in your work. Painters, you can see it. Actors, you can see it with a method actor when they just kind of let go and they become that person. It's that type of thing. You don't plan it. You let it kind of, you have to trust yourself.
mm. That's a big theme in my work because that's what this involves. I'm listening to you talk and I just sort of think that artists and creatives should be running the world.
Well, in some cases, sometimes they get to do things and you see the result. When you see that they're
Hmm.
the artist that actually influenced, design. Like if you think about like Steve Jobs, a lot of what he was doing is a lot of art.
Yeah.
For an IT company initially, he had a lot of art in his mindset that wasn't totally logical. It was like he's doing things kind of the feel. And when you get the people who like are allowed to do that, you get different things to happen. When you get, you kind of get these ideas of Renaissance people. Like if you have a Renaissance type of spirit, you have like it's both art and science in the same person. And
Mm.
I went to school with the Socratic method. I went to a college in Maine called Bowdoin. It wasn't all we had blue book exams. Our teachers didn't just ask us like yes and no. We had to kind of be able to explain in a blue book essay at the end of the course. Did we understand the course? And could we actually, in our own words, interpret what we learned to show
Mm.
that we actually understood it? Is a different type of mindset. And to me, it's like if you don't do that, you don't really understand it.
Yeah.
You're
You
just
need
spitting
both.
out something somebody told
Mm.
you.
They made you really own it. Yeah.
You have to own it. Yeah.
Y- You know, when I think about what I know about creatives and more logical people, I think I might be onto something about creatives ruling the world because people that are, and I know you already know this, but people that are typically more creative are more right-brained individuals, right? And then people that tend to live in their logic are more left-brained individuals. And the way that this usually works is that the people who are left-brained, who are logical, live their lives inside of deep silos, deep, tall silos. So they become specialists at their thing and their one thing and their one thing only, or they become experts on their experience of life in their deep silo, which is great. We need people like this, but to live like that as a society, because I think the stat is like something like 70% of people in the West or the US are left brained, logical people. So, what that means is we get a whole bunch of people who are living just deep, 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 deep in the caverns of their own experience. And the things that typically come with that are like, as long as me, myself, and mine are taken care of, then everyone else can go pack sand. Whereas creatives don't see life like right-brained individuals don't live life usually in big tall silos. They live their life in a lot of shallow buckets, and all the
Yeah.
buckets connect together, and so they can see. It's almost like jack of all trades, master of none, but a little more complex, whereas like people that are more creative in their right brain tend to be able to see the full picture. They can see how things fit together. They can see how one bucket affects the other. They tend to have a broader perspective. And I just wonder if that right side of the brain is something that as a
Yeah.
society could be honed.
Well, I think the problem is that we in the industrial society of the bell curve. And so what happens is people get in that narrow bell curve. Like Henry Ford measures you based on how fast you can do the automation with the machines.
Mm-hmm.
You get put in a cubicle and you get a test, get standardized tests, you get assessments. Then on that bell curve, the Einstein, he got a D on math, but he's the greatest physicist ever. So they didn't really measure him, right? That the measurements are off on the creatives. They're a lot of times on the outside of that bell curve. And the thing is, you actually need people like that, but our measurements actually say that those people aren't good, aren't qualified, but they are more than qualified. And business is starting to figure out that you can't just measure people like that. You have to bring creative people in, but they still kind of get it wrong where they don't realize like it's hard to measure those creatives other than let them do their thing.
Right,
But
right.
people want to be able to have predictable results. They want to analyze it. They want to control it. It's hard to control that kind of creativity. It kind of happens, and then it's like, well, how do you measure that?
It's hard to measure the abstract or the subjective. Is that how that goes? We like
Yeah, it's
objective. We
difficult.
like the data. Show me the money. Show me the money,
Yeah.
basically. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think, yeah, I think we minimize that heart message because you can't quantify it, right? So if you can't quantify it, you can't measure it. Like an athlete, you can measure how good they are, right? Like how many goals they hit, how many, how accurate they are. But when you get into the heart messages, well, how do you measure that? Like empathy, how do you put that on the scale? Or people
Right.
who have holistic thinking that's not narrow minded, that allow people, listen to people and actually learn from your mistake and don't keep on doing the same thing just because you want like doing the same thing. It's like, that it's hard to, you know, tell people that the way should be more with uncertainty. Because the thing is, like when you're in the creative world, a lot of what you do is you go into uncertainty because in order to progress as a creative, you can't just keep doing the same thing. You have
Yeah.
to be willing to not be afraid of going into found frontiers. And you'll see it with like famous musicians like the Miles Davises, the Coltrane's, the Princes, the Hendrix. They went to places that nobody else went, and then people followed them. But the person that does that has to be a certain level of fearlessness to get to that point.
You need courage, you need trust, you need uh, the ability to value things that we cannot see. And these are none of this is all of this is so countercultural. It goes so against the grain of what we've been taught, you know. And so it takes even just to have this conversation, even just to like ask the question of like, how can I live from my heart or live in these nuanced ways. It takes so much courage to even do that, you know, to and to be someone that is willing to raise their hand and go out into the unknown. I mean, we're taught to conform. We're taught, you know, so much of what I work with my clients with is this word should. This we should all over ourselves, right? And I studied with Baron Baptiste. He's a very famous the father sort of power yoga here in the West. And he said years ago when I was training with him in Mexico, he said that the word should is the most damaging word in the entire human English language because it implies that all is not as it's meant to be, right? It implies just in and of itself that something is wrong or something is missed, but that's how we live our lives. What should I be doing? I shouldn't be doing this. This is bad. This isn't right. This is wrong. They're wrong. They're wrong. They're wrong. I'm right. They're wrong. You know, and so we're all built on this black and white thinking. And then we've built our lives based on these rules that are all built about conforming, about like trying to keep a safe path, not having to go into the unknown, trying to guarantee your safety. So many people that I work with, they're like, I'll do whatever you say as long as you tell me where we're going. And I'm like, no, 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 no. That's not, that's, we step out off the ledge to off into the abyss together. You know, there's no guarantees, and that's really part of the beauty. But I think I had more to say about that, but I sort of trailed off a little bit. But it's this whole black and white thinking. The rules are very clear for black and white. People like
Mhm.
a very clear answer. This is a yes. This is a no. As long as I follow these rules, I'm going to be safe. And that's black and white thinking. And it's called a thinking error. It's a way that our brains try to compartmentalize us to keep us safe. But you know, so we can theorize in black and white all day long, but really life occurs in all the colors of the rainbow. But again, like we're not equipped for that. People don't measure that. There's no rules, there's no rule book for that. You know, a lot of the work I do is helping people come back to their own authenticity and find their own intuitive voice. The sixth chakra is Agna chakra, the third eye, and it's the seat of our intuition and our wisdom, our own personal experience, the wisdom that we individually glean from our experience of being alive. And so many people come to me and they're like, I want to follow my intuition, but I don't even know where to start. And so that's the work, that's the game, that's the business I'm in is as adults. Now everybody's looking around and saying, how do I live from my heart? How do I do this? How do I live intuitively inside of a world, a system that isn't designed for it? You know, and so we have to teach ourselves how to do these things. And that's what I help people do.
So, what role do like emotions play in breaking through like limiting cycles?
I think they play such a bigger role than anyone ever gives them credit to. You know, or gives them credit for. I think, you know, like I said, so many coaches say like change your thoughts, change your results, change your thoughts, change your reality. And I think again, even in that model, we're not giving like to like the thoughts. So the way it works is that we think a thought and then immediately your body generates a hormone, a chemical response in response to that thought you've been thinking. So yes, we can solve our thoughts from the root. And also we have to pay attention to these emotions that habitually come up for us. I mean, it's like the number of women that I talk to that are filled with resentment around their relationships. It's like you cannot move forward and create something new if that big bundle of resentment and disappointment is living inside of your body. Like, it's like, yes, we are complex beings. Yes, we can experience a lot of emotions at the same time congruently, but really, like, if your nervous system habitually is saturated with resentment, like, I don't care how much you want to practice gratitude or slap on appreciation, it ain't going to stick.
Hmm.
Nothing. If your cells are filled with this habitual, you fill in the blank for yourself, feeling like life is against you, feeling like you're a victim, feeling like things never go your way, like there is just not any space for anything else to get in there. And so much, it's like, I get really excited. People come to me and they're like in despair about what's happening out there in the world. They're like, how do we solve this? Our systems aren't working. And I agree. But I don't think the answer, I mean, yes, we solve that out there, but I think we do that not in the way that we think. I think that we solve that out there by getting really, really granular in here. And
Yeah.
it's like finding the thread of your life and saying, man, and I'm kind of using myself as an example. Like I've seen myself as a victim. That's a big part of why I drank. It's like life is always kind of against me. So I see this thread of victimization coming through. And then in the moment, my body is so used to just feeling that, to just seeing like, see, life is hard. See, I told you so. Like my body has developed a habit of doing that. And so it's up to me if I want to not be a victim and if I want to really create a life that I've never seen before, to take that feeling that my body has grown so accustomed to and say, whoa, hold up, hold up. I can see this. It's valid. I get it, but I can't just go into it. I can't surrender into it. I can't just let it take me away. So what can I do here that's more neutral? That would give me a little bit more agency, and so that's what I really teach people to do, is like take these these feelings that they feel like they're just at their mercy, and really anchoring down and saying, no, 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 the buck stops here, and it stops inside of me, inside of these circuits that I'm just now drawing awareness to.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I was in school, I studied sociology. So I studied like the microcosm and the macrocosm, which is like the individual and then group behavior. So the individuals can be primed to be affected by group behavior. You used to look at like crowd behavior in a riot, right? And the individuals getting triggered. And there's individuals getting triggered by group behavior going back and forth. And the fact is, like, individuals affect the macrocosm. So you can do something when you change your kind of your mindset. So if you get a mindset that, like, if you think of in the Buddhist philosophy of like Nichiren Daishonin, is like law, cause, and effect. I bring negativity to me if my outlook is negative. Then I'm just going to keep on building negativity, and negativity is just going to keep on happening. If you believe in positivity, you start in your day with affirmations of positivity rather than affirmations of resentment and negativity, then those positive things happen. It's kind of like an artist when we feel like if I show up and I do positive artwork and I put it out in the world, opportunities just come to me because I'm
Mm.
actually putting things out there. But if I say, well, I can't be successful, I'm not even going to show it. I'm just going to keep my 100 demos to myself and never show anybody. Then you never get the opportunity because you're just living in this resentment, or I'm not good enough, and you never show anybody. So you're not going to get, nobody knows about it. It just stays inside and it burns you and it makes you feel bad. So you have to be willing to kind of work on yourself and be able to, make that actualize that thing and make it happen.
That's beautiful. That word actualize, I think that that's so key. And the word that was coming into my brain when I was listening to you speak is embodiment. That yes, mindset is key, but your new mindset is only as good as your body will believe you. right? And a lot of times there's a big gap. A lot of people need to diffuse emotions. Like they need to just get it out, right? And but really like you have to choose out. It sounds like your affirmations are really working for you. And so for your listeners, I would really encourage like that when you choose affirmations, sometimes they have to be like not the full shebang right away. They have to be something that's like a little bit more neutral or a little bit closer to where you find yourself in the moment so that when you repeat them over and over in your brain, like that's how you know if an affirmation is quote unquote right for you or working for you, that when you say it inside your brain, you feel better.
Mhm, yeah.
Right. And so I know a lot of people are running around town being like, I am this, I am that. But it's like if it's not getting in, if you don't feel relief, if it doesn't change your internal emotional state, then in my opinion, like, it's great. It's great to have an intention, but like, again, I think bridging that gap between these new thoughts and then really like letting them touch you, I think is really an important key.
Well, I think when your heart is full and you let it kind of smile over you, then you feel that
Mm,
positivity and it's not something you're going to have any self doubt about. Like when you get
yeah.
this affirmation and it's kind of this
Mm,
universal thing that's very uplifting. And some people would say, well, that's spirituality. It doesn't necessarily have to be spirituality, but it's like it's just the affirmations that lead you toward, you know, things that aren't gonna hurt you. They're actually gonna, try to negate the hurt because you start
yeah.
to see a
Mm,
path. Like, I'm a cancer survivor. Age 27, I had a level 3 sarcoma and I survived.
mm,
And, I
wow.
just kind of felt like there were things before the cancer that was self-limiting and I was scared of, wouldn't do public speaking, wouldn't be out in front. And then I said, "Well, what was I scared of?" And then once I beat the cancer, I said, "Why should I be scared of anything?" I went to Japan and doing the stuff I'm doing because I was, I was like, pre-cancer young version of myself. I was totally fearful of a lot of things, and I would not be willing to put myself out there. And then after, I said, "Why not?" And you don't have to go through that kind of crucible moment, but I think people have to kind of find that what's inside and see what's, kind of approach that person that is you and see what you're
Yeah.
doing to like limit yourself.
Yeah. And you have to self-resource. You have to kind of it's not a pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but it's like finding your best qualities on the inside and really leaning into them so that they can carry you through. I feel like in order to affect habit change or breakthrough on a level that lasts, it's like these parts of you kind of are at war inside, that there are these like, and this is for all of us. It's like inside of each of us, there are these parts that, like I said earlier, like your brain and your body, they don't really want your highest self. They just want your alive self. And so there are these parts of you that when you want to expand, when you want to grow, when you want to overcome your fears, like there are very real parts of your reptilian brain, your amygdala that are going to say, no, 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 we're good here. We're fine. This is great. See, look, you're alive. You're safe. This is good. We're good. We're good here. Right. But then there are also the frontal lobe parts, the brilliant parts, the parts that can dream and see something new and want more and yearn for harmony and beauty that we haven't seen yet. And so ultimately, like you said, like there's a choice that we have to make is like when you see all these parts that live inside of yourself, you have to kind of decide at some point, like, which one am I going to give more voice to? Which one am I going to give more energy to? Which one do I want to be making the decisions on my behalf? And it sounds like your cancer journey was a real breakthrough for you, like once you facing like what I would imagine to be probably the ultimate fear that really you realized you didn't have anything to be afraid of after that.
Yeah, they have run into it with like other people I've talked to that, when they hit a moment, they could talk to a domestic violence, somebody who went through that, or they went through like catastrophic like situation in their life, and then I've talked to people where they've kind of gone through that crucible moment, and they discovered like they had this capability they didn't know they had, and it's kind of like when people
Mm,
start to believe it's like because maybe you didn't think you were good enough, and then you realize that that wasn't a truth. That was a belief that you erroneously felt, and now you don't have to be stuck there. You don't have to be caught in that. You kind of it's like maybe this idea, like you have this idea of rebalancing heart energy, and like people don't realize the heart is the center. Right. So if you didn't
Yep,
think your heart was the center and you thought your mind was the center, and then you had all these, or you had these reptilian mind thoughts that were kind of ruling your life, to keeping you in this resent mode, and
exactly.
not, how do you break out of that? Well, it seems like you have to rebalance that in some way.
Yeah, well, if you do think that's the center, then that's a limiting way to live your life. It's like we know about our cars, we know about our homes, we know about everything, but we don't know how our brains work. It's so wild. But like under uh-oh. Having that downstream and upstream perspective, like, so when you go to rebalance the heart, like I had a chakra workshop a few months ago, and this woman came in and she was like, I keep seeing these energy readers and these people, and they say that my heart is blocked and my heart is blocked. And I was like, oh, interesting. Because when you really parse it apart, it's like, is your heart blocked, or have you just been living in scarcity and fear so long from your root and your sacral that it's not actually your heart that needs tending, it's your foundation. You know
Mm,
what I mean? It's like not actually the heart that needs tending, it's your sense of connection. It might not
mhm,
actually be your heart, it's actually the fact that you don't feel a sense of empowerment, so you feel like your power is just vaporizing away. Which so in order to come into our hearts, which is the most powerful organ that we have in my sort of thinking here, it's like we have to see what's being fed to the heart, whether it's from these beliefs or are they truths. Is it from our destabilized foundation? Is it from these stories that we've created about what it's like to connect over time? Like those are the pieces that actually need to be looked at in order to create a homeostasis in this important center.
and this kind of goes into the physical with yoga, like what I used to see in Japan with the Tai Chi, and people doing a lot of like, I would go out in the middle of Tokyo, and in these parks, they had these ancient artifacts in the parks, and people would be doing Tai Chi and they'd be kind of meditating. And they had the salarymen in their business suits, and they had these people, they were coming out with this real high tech stuff. So you had high tech, and then this old Japan that's in the same place. And
Mm.
people were doing these very spiritual kind of meditations and taking the time in the middle of the workday to go stop trying to make $1 million and go and actually center themselves and do these practices. And it's like, wow, that was very eye opening when I saw that. And it was like throughout the whole culture, there's a lot of things like that that I would see. And it is a different perspective, but it was worth taking the time to like dive into it, and to actually, I spend a lot of time every day chanting like 2, 3 times a day as part of my practice.
Mm.
It's like a meditation, and it does, even if I'm busy, I still set the time. It's like, even if I had, my boss is saying I got to do this, I was like, you know what, I still take the time to do this. Kind of like what I saw in Japan was like the people would still take the time no matter what, to still follow what they needed to do for them, for themselves.
Mm. So brilliant. Number one, I just want to say that you are like your whole thing is vibration, right? Like I just love that about you, that like you see the energy and you feel that, and it seems like your whole life has been formed like with the chanting, with the musical instruments. Like it sounds like vibration is the way you achieve that inner peace, or you create that for yourself, and that's so beautiful. There's so much going on with sound healing right now, and Himalayan singing bowls, and so many things that people are really starting to understand these vibrational effects. So for you to be living it through your chanting and through your expression of music, I just think that that's so healing, and it really energizes me to see what healing and wholeness looks like to other people. So there's that. I think I was going to say something else, but I may have forgotten what it was because I was kind of jazzed by what you shared.
No, it's just I've always believed
Oh,
in in that kind of power of the sound wave.
yeah.
I got into synthesizers when I was 17. And I actually got into sound design. And there's this whole theory about it called subtractive synthesis. You take a sound wave and you distill it, and you can make it into
Mm,
anything. You can make it turn it, a square wave into a bass and a triangle into a bell. There's certain things you can
mm,
do. And once you learn what the waves do and how you can kind of clash them together and make, combinations of waves and convert them and there's technical, it's like art and science. But a lot of it over time, I let go of the science and I just got a feel for it on my machines. I kind of just feel
mm.
it. And I don't even look at the oscilloscope or anything. I just go for what I want to convey. And it becomes like once you kind of trust in what you're doing, you want to convey the feeling. That becomes more important than the technical, accuracy of it. It's more important to actually get
Yeah.
to the heart of it and get to
Mm,
the part that's actually going to affect somebody.
yeah. So you may know a little bit more about this than I do. Sometimes my brain doesn't have a very good recall for details, but since you lived in Japan, there was a very famous Japanese doctor who's now deceased who devoted his whole life to studying the effect of vibration on water. Does this ring any sort of
Mm.
bell for you?
Yeah, I think I
Do you
remember.
know?
I don't know, remember the name, but I
I
understand
can't
that.
remember his
I,
name,
I can go
but
find
but
it. But
for
yeah, I'm aware of it.
yeah, and for any of your listeners, like literally you could just Google effects of vibration on water and you might throw like Japanese doctor in there too, but you'll see pictures online of like what like so his whole exploration was that he would speak benevolently to water and then he would look at those water molecules under a microscope and he would see that like when you speak benevolently to water that it changes shape and it's beautiful and symmetrical and delightful. It almost looks like snowflakes, like these really beautiful lovely images. And then conversely, if you speak maliciously or judgmentally or harshly over water molecules and look at those under the microscope, they too will have changed shape but in a completely different way. They're distorted and jagged and they almost look angry. And we're made of 80% water. So why wouldn't we be the same? Of course we respond to music. Of course we respond to vibration this way. Gosh, it's fascinating. And when we know this about ourselves, then things get really good.
And that's where like that, that makes sense because, some people would say, well, words don't mean anything, but words are sound waves. And like I spend all my time with sound waves, a lot of time. Um, and so if you have words that go in a very kind of aggressive pattern, and that's an aggressive sonic pattern, you could actually see it on an oscilloscope versus a more soothing pattern, like if you were doing a lullaby, speaking, singing to a baby versus like yelling at somebody. And you look at that in an oscilloscope, and if we're all water, if you see that very jarring set of sound waves coming into you versus the more soothing sound waves coming into you, it affects your how you're as a human being, how you react. And it makes sense that it would. And so then if you think about the world, well, the water's going to probably react that way too, because everything's kind of interconnected. So when people start losing connections and thinking, well, animals can't feel the way humans feel, and then people see very emotional photos of swans, being in love, and thinking that an animal couldn't have that depth of love is like, well, they look like they do, but you made a judgment that they don't because maybe you want to kill them. So you don't want to think about like if they think like you, what does that mean if you kill them? If they feel like you, so you try to separate things out so you don't have to feel. That's why I think a lot of people do it. They try to segment things so they don't have to think about the consequences of what they do.
We have a very othering way of being here in the West. And I ascribe that to a lot of Judeo-Christian sort of thinking where it's like sort of man has been commanded to subdue the earth and to be above the plants and the animals. And so, as opposed to an indigenous perspective that really, focuses on a co-creation and a cohabitation with the earth. But we've really haven't done ourselves a service, in my opinion, by making ourselves separate. Because again, it's like water binds us all. It's like we've lost our connection, the big tall silos versus the little buckets. It's like, and so these vibrational components, I think finding these ways, that's why music brings people together so much, right? Is it's like something that I think we can really gather around. And I had one thing that I wanted to say in response to what you just shared about how words don't matter. And I just want to say that the study of neurolinguistic programming actually says that we use words not they we use words and they don't describe our reality, they actually create our reality. And so ever since I started thinking of words through that lens, it's become really powerful that words are meaningful, energy is meaningful, and everything inside of us follows whatever those words say. So it's, unless you're a real ninja on intercepting that chemical response right away, I would say that our words very much do matter.
Yeah, because when I was in school, I'm part like Native American, Cherokee, and Blackfoot, and I was always very interested in indigenous. I went to Bowdoin. I started studying a lot of indigenous cultures to kind of learn about Cherokee and learn about Blackfoot because that's part of my heritage. And just the kind of this harmonious nature of like concepts. When I was in school, I started learning about like Calvinism and industrialization, and it being able to
Mhm.
separate nature from man. And then the consequences of that now you see potentially with like climate changes of
Mhm.
being in disharmony with Gaia, like and not looking at what the way indigenous people would consider the gods to be the wind, the earth itself, fire, things that you, and then having respect for those things with the animals. But when you disrespect it and you don't consider the consequences of your actions, it causes like a lot of harm that we're actually living in a phase because of that disconnection that we're all can see it and we're living through it where it's important that individuals get back to some sense of harmony overall at the microcosm so that we can build the macrocosm back up.
Exactly. So that lack of connection with everything around us, I mean, what it has to start with the rebuilding the connection on the inside, right? And that just starts with this ability to go inward and sift through what it is that you find in there. And it's, really, you mentioned the Industrial Revolution. Gosh, we could talk for another hour about that. The Industrial Revolution, it totally made us and it totally broke us. I mean, I think, and it changed. I just finished reading James Nestor's book Breath. Have you read that?
I haven't read that yet. It's on my list.
Well, it had been on my list for a long time too, and I'm a yoga teacher, and I hadn't read it, and I finally read it and was like, "Gosh, I'm late to the party here." But he kind of offers that the Industrial Revolution changed the way we chew, which changed the way our faces were shaped, which changed the way we breathe. There's not enough room inside of our heads essentially to house everything that's going on. And so like it made it so that we could live life on this grand scale, this grand convenience. But in my mind, it seems like we've traded convenience for connection. And so now we're all faced with like, are we willing to allow our lives to become like a little less convenient so that we can be more connected? And I'm a little worried if people will be willing to do that.
Yeah, I think it's what happens is sometimes they get forced into it.
Well, something
Because
bad has to happen.
well, yeah, Gaia will, the Earth will create a situation where you have no choice but to live in more harmonious ways, or you will continue to see the disharmony. And so at some point,
Yeah.
the disharmony becomes so overwhelming that you don't have the convenience. That convenience won't be workable. It is
Yep.
in my opinion, but I think it's it's somewhat logical and mystical at the same time because there's science behind it and there's art and there's philosophy. But at the end of the day, it's going to be what it is. So
I know. I guess we're just hoping that maybe we wouldn't have to get to that point, but we probably will. That's what with my alcohol-free
yeah,
clients
it
and
is.
stuff, I say to them, it's like you don't have to hit rock bottom to wait to change your ways. You really don't have to do that. but there's something inside of our human system that just says it's not bad enough. And then it is, and then we change. So hopefully it will be something
Well,
that's
that's the
workable.
hope. The hope is the macrocosm will affect the macrocosm, because sometimes we have political systems. I was a political science major. They make it very difficult for the individual to actually change something that's very negative. If you're
Mm, totally.
in an oligarchy that's super negative and doing all the, it's hard for the common person to break that oligarchy or to break
Absolutely.
totalitarianism. And if that's doing negative things to both the macro and the micro and the planet overall, the individuals could be like, we don't like this. But it takes something to actually takes a lot of effort to overcome it. You end up with, like a
Right.
World War II scenario where you finally get to push a point where you have to just say these totalitarians, these oligarchs know they can't do this
Yep.
to
Yep.
humankind. You have to stop it. And so there's a point where the people will have to make a decision where that, and it's not an easy decision. That generation understood that was not an easy decision,
Yep. Yep.
to deal with that. But
I think if there's one thing that I learned from the pandemic, it's that our systems and structures that we thought could keep us safe, they cannot. And maybe they probably never could. But they definitely can't in the way that we thought or had assumed going forward. So so much of this lives in our systems, right? And so it's like I'm not here to say like, because there are people out there that can do as much of their own internal work and they're within the system that will not allow them to transcend, and that's very, very, very real. And yet, despite all of that, I still believe in this indomitable human spirit that says wherever you are, whatever it is you're facing, can the answer just still lie inside each and every one of us? And if we can come to that answer within us all, that authentic answer with whatever your circumstances, I think if each of us were to go live our authentic lives, free of our stories, free of our conditioning, free of those rules that everyone should or shouldn't live by, I really think that we would, if we could meet each other as we really are, if our true selves, I think that things would be different. I think we could create something different from that place.
yeah, you can have like a human revolution in your mind, even if you were imprisoned. You can still be thinking with a like a very positive outlook, and you could leave the
Yes.
world with some really brilliant writing that affects the
Right.
rest of the planet. And so, even though you yourself might not be free, your mind might be free to affect, and what you say might be free to affect a change across, like a Nelson Mandela. He was in prison. His words were so eloquent, they triggered all these behaviors. Martin Luther King was imprisoned
Absolutely.
and he wrote the Birmingham letter from jail. So you can do things even though your state might not be perfect or you might be under duress. You can still do positive actions.
Well, and if nothing else, they'll just make you feel better, right? Like then your experience of living will be more harmonious and more grounded and more filled with purpose and intention, right? And so even if nothing else, like even if it doesn't touch the collective, which I
Transformational.
just
Yeah.
don't see
Yeah.
how that could be possible, it still just means that you get a better life.
Inner transformation, if you're feeling better, I think you're still part of the whole universe. And if you're in the universe and everybody's all interconnected with electricity, if you're putting out positive energy, even though you don't see how it's affecting people, it still affects. And from a high level, the fact that
Absolutely.
you have that positivity. So the kind of concept of like the law of attraction and law of cause and effect is like that positivity is still important,
Yep.
even if you don't think it reaches anybody. It's still very important.
Yep. As within, so without.
Well, thank you again. We're at the close of the program. I want to let people know about your website again, lifecoachingbylotus.com. Maybe you can tell people, like, if people click on that, what happens when they go to that
Yeah.
website?
Thank you. Thank you for asking. So if you go to lifecoachingbylotus.com, I know it's a lot of letters. But if you just land on my main page, you'll see all my offerings. I do one-on-one is really my specialty. I love spending a fair amount of time with people to be able to unweave and reweave new cycles that really transform their lives and the whole world. So you'll see a place where you can book with me to explore the one-on-one path. And there's also a Patreon community that I have, where I cultivate tools for the journey that people will actually use. And so it's a real fun community. But if you just by chance, I created something special for this conversation, that if you wanted to just add a /chakras to that URL, it'll take you to a special page where you can sign up for a chakra inventory with me, where we can kind of map out what's happening for you in your heart, below your heart, above your heart, and we can kind of get a sense for what's happening inside of you and give you a couple ways to reroute that in real time. So I'd be really excited to walk people through that experience.
Like that. If I added chakra to it, is that right?
I think it has an S on it.
Oh, why is an S?
Look at you.
Oh yeah, I did. I spelled it wrong.
Real time.
I spelled it wrong. That's when you type fast.
I'm super impressed by you. And Phantom, this has just been so wonderful. I think you're so interesting, and life is all about the layers, and you've got such dynamic layers, and it's been really, really fun to chat with you today.
So that's like chakras with an S on it?
Yes, sir.
Let's see if I can get that to come back. Is that the right one?
Perfect. Yes, yeah. Sir. See it.
All right. Thank you again for being on the program. Again, this will be on almost every platform that podcasts are on. We're going to give a landing page to your audience by tomorrow. But we were live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, and that will be clickable on those platforms. We'll give you the Facebook and YouTube immediately after we're off the air. But thank you again for being on the program. Remember to just hang in the green room for a second.
Okay.
For the final recording. And thank you for being on the show. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.